My name is Brian Mitchell, and what I'm about to tell you was never meant to leave the building. 8 seconds. That's all it took. A red Slack notification pulsed on my screen like a silent alarm in a nuclear control room. No meeting, no call. Just a sentence in all caps, sharp as a blade. Give me the shared drive password and clean out your desk. That was the moment he signed his own sentence. He just didn't know it yet. Listen closely. Because if you've ever worked inside a corporation, if you've ever answered to a boss who didn't understand what you actually do, this story isn't entertainment. It's a warning. And once you hear it, you won't unsee the machinery behind the curtain. Corporate life trains men to believe power lives in titles. VP Director. Chief. But real power doesn't sit in conference rooms or LinkedIn bios. It hums quietly. It lives in systems, dependencies, and agreements written by people who plan 10 moves ahead while others chase applause. I was 49 years old when this happened. 11 years embedded inside a logistics empire that moved medicine, food, and infrastructure across the country, while executives congratulated themselves for vision. They saw me every day and still never saw me. That's how it always is. The most dangerous men in a company are the ones who don't look dangerous at all. Then Kevin arrived. New VP, private equity darling, teeth too white, suit too confident, the kind of man who confuses momentum with competence and believes disruption means breaking things he doesn't understand. He didn't walk into the company, he detonated into it, dragging buzzwords and ego behind him like shrapnel. Men like Kevin believe firing someone is an act of dominance, a show of force, a public execution to establish order. What they never learn, what no one teaches them, is that corporations are not kingdoms. They are ecosystems, and ecosystems punish ignorance brutally. Here's the truth. They won't tell you. Revenge in corporate life isn't loud. It doesn't scream. It doesn't threaten. It waits. It lets arrogance tighten its own noose. That Slack message wasn't an insult. It was evidence, and evidence in the right hands becomes a weapon. If you're still listening, good. Because from here on, we go deeper into contracts nobody reads, power structures nobody admits exist, and the quiet war between those who lead and those who actually keep the world running. You weren't supposed to hear this, but now that you have, there's no going back. There's a sound inside every corporation that never makes it into earnings calls. A low, constant hum. That's the sound of dependency. Servers breathing, systems talking to each other in a language executives don't speak. That hum is what keeps the illusion alive. I learned that sound years ago, standing alone in a server room at 2 in the morning, fluorescent lights buzzing like insects trapped in glass. The air smelled like ozone and inevitability. That room didn't care about org charts. It didn't care about Kevin's resume. It only cared about precision, and it rewarded the men who understood it with something far more valuable than praise leverage. Here's the first secret you're never taught. Corporations don't run on leadership. They run on continuity, on things not breaking, on disasters that never happen because someone quietly prevented them while everyone else slept. Kevin didn't understand that. He saw cost centers. He saw legacy systems. He saw a middle-aged man in a polo shirt and jeans sitting in a corner desk that looked expendable. That's how predators misidentify prey. They mistake stillness for weakness. When he tapped my monitor with his class ring mitt, of course, and asked me to boost the Wi-Fi so he could stream a leadership talk, something crystallized. He didn't know the difference between infrastructure and convenience, between a foundation and a coat of paint. Men like that always confuse surface with substance. Corporate manipulation doesn't start with cruelty. It starts with simplification. Reduce complexity, reduce people. Reduce reality until it fits inside a slide deck. Then call it strategy. After that came the meetings, mandatory huddles, alignment sessions, innovation workshops, rituals designed to manufacture obedience under the disguise of teamwork. I ignored them all. Not out of rebellion, but because my agreement didn't recognize theater as billable work. That's when Kevin noticed me, truly noticed me, not as an asset, as a problem. And here's the second secret. The moment a manager says everyone is replaceable, what they're really confessing is fear. Fear that they don't understand the machine they've been put in charge of. Fear that control is slipping through fingers polished by PowerPoint, not practice. He hovered. He threatened outsourcing. He smiled that business school smile, the one meant to signal dominance while asking permission from the room. But every word he spoke revealed the same thing. He had no idea where the landmines were buried. What Kevin didn't know was that I wasn't ignoring him. I was measuring him. Every email, every demand, every overstep. Men like him think power is seized in moments. In reality, it's accumulated in silence. And while he was busy announcing transformation, the company's real nervous system kept pulsing through code, contracts, and obligations written in ink far darker than Slack messages. That's when the atmosphere changed. Veterans grew quiet. Executives avoided eye contact. Animals sense earthquakes before the ground moves. Kevin thought he was cleaning house. What he was actually doing was walking deeper into a structure he didn't build, couldn't see, and was never meant to control. When a corporation senses danger, it doesn't scream, it tightens. Conversations get shorter. Doors close more often. Coffee goes cold in untouched mugs. The men who've survived long enough to know where the bodies are buried start moving differently, like soldiers who recognize the sound of incoming artillery before the first impact. That's when Scott came to me. Scott was the CO, gray at the temples, eyes that had watched 3 economic collapses and lived to tell about them. He leaned in close, voice low, like the walls had ears, which, in a way, they did. "He's asking for credentials," Scott said. "Admin access, root directories, backup archives, encryption keys." That sentence should make the hair on your neck stand up. Because that's not management, that's invasion. Here's another truth they don't teach you. In corporate life, access is power, not authority, not titles. Access, whoever controls the keys controls reality. Change the data, you change the story. Lose the data, you lose the company. I didn't look away from my screen. I was tuning database queries that pushed $40 million in shipping manifests a day, medicine, food, infrastructure. Lives, dressed up as spreadsheets. I told Scott the truth. Proper channels, legal review, security protocols. Kevin didn't want oversight. Oversight slows down men who are trying to prove something. He wanted shortcuts. Shortcuts are how disasters are born. Then mod oversight's bonus rushed queta. Kevin didn't slow down. He accelerated. That's how you know a man is running from his own insecurity. He mistakes momentum for mastery. Emails came faster. Tone sharpened. Words like compliance and alignment replaced collaboration. When managers start borrowing language from lawyers, it's because they're already afraid of them. He began circling my desk more often. Not to learn, to assert. Leaning against the partition like he owned the space, like proximity itself conferred dominance. That's a corporate myth. Physical presence intimidates juniors. It does nothing to men who understand leverage. "You missed another stand-up," he said one morning, voice calm, eyes calculating. "That's not how teams operate." I turned my chair slowly. Eye contact matters in these moments. "I was migrating backup servers, so your investor report doesn't crash the system Friday. It's documented in the scope report I sent you," he smiled. "The rehearsed one. The one designed to make disagreement feel like insubordination. We need to break down silos, Brian. Everyone needs to row in the same direction." Silos. Another word executives use when they don't understand boundaries. Boundaries protect systems. Remove them, and everything bleeds into chaos. Team-building exercises and vision sessions aren't deliverables. That's when his eyes changed. Men like Kevin don't fear resistance. They fear being ignored, and I wasn't fighting him, I was invalidating him. "Everyone is replaceable," he said. "Technology is a commodity now. We can outsource this to kids overseas for pennies." That's the lie corporations whisper to justify cruelty. That expertise is interchangeable. That experience is optional. That history is dead weight. It's how they convince themselves that removing a keystone won't collapse the arch. I stood up, calm, measured. "My work isn't a commodity, it's structural. You don't replace a foundation while standing on the roof," he smirked. That smug, MBA certified grin that says, "I don't need to understand you to control you." "We'll see. I'm bringing in modern tools, cloud solutions. We're cleaning house." Cleaning house. That phrase has ended more companies than recessions ever did. Here's the thing. No one tells you when executives say modern, they usually mean cheap. When they say cloud, they mean someone else's problem. And when they say clean, they mean remove anyone who can contradict me. The office felt it. Senior leaders grew quiet. Meetings ended early. Emails were carefully worded. The building itself felt tense, like it was holding its breath. Kevin thought fear was spreading. What was actually spreading was awareness, because men who've been around long enough know this pattern. A new leader arrives, eager to prove his worth. He picks a visible target, someone older, quieter, someone who doesn't perform loyalty loudly. That target becomes symbolic. Break him, and the rest will fall in line. What Kevin never considered is that symbols work both ways. And once a man like him chooses his target, He unknowingly gives that man permission to stop protecting him. The Slack message was coming. I could feel it. And when it arrived, it wouldn't be an ending. He says the board wants it. Says he's auditing inefficiencies. That word inefficiencies is how corporate violence justifies itself. It's how livelihoods are erased without ever saying the word people. You're not fired, you're optimized out. I laughed, not because it was funny, because it was inevitable. I'd seen this pattern before. Consultants parachute in, slash, simplify, extract value, leave before the collapse. The difference this time was that the collapse had a name, and it wasn't the company's. That night, I didn't sleep. I went home, sat in the dark, and opened the contract. Page by page, clause by clause, termination requirements, breach penalties, notice periods, board consensus thresholds. It wasn't paperwork, it was architecture. Legal steel reinforced with foresight. You see, real revenge doesn't begin with anger. It begins with preparation, with understanding the rules better than the man who thinks he's above them. Kevin believed speed was strength. He believed disruption was bravery. He believed he could rewrite reality by sheer confidence. But confidence doesn't override obligations, and charisma doesn't dissolve signatures. While he was dreaming of bonuses and praise, automated scripts ran at 3 in the morning. Systems synchronized. Dependencies intertwined tighter and tighter. Not maliciously. This is where most men fail. They react too early. They show their hand. They burn bridges before crossing them. I did nothing, because the most dangerous move in corporate warfare is patience. Let the arrogant man make the first illegal move. Let him put it in writing. Let him involve witnesses who don't even understand what they're watching. Kevin thought he was setting a trap. What he didn't realize is that the trap was already there, and all he had to do was step forward. The notification arrived on a Tuesday morning. No warning, no meeting request. Just that red glow in the corner of my screen, pulsing like a heartbeat that didn't belong to me anymore. Give me the shared drive password and clean out your desk. All caps, no punctuation. Authority performed, not earned. He'd CC'd Har. That detail matters more than you think. Because this is the moment where corporate arrogance crosses into documented stupidity. Kevin didn't fire me in a closed room with legal present. He didn't initiate a review. He didn't consult the board. He created a permanent record of breach, time-stamped, witnessed, and delivered through a system the company itself archived. This is where lesser men feel panic, or rage, or the urge to respond, to explain, to defend themselves against an accusation that doesn't even legally exist. I felt none of that. What I felt was a click, cold, mechanical, like a safety disengaging. Rule number 1 of corporate warfare. The moment your opponent puts their mistake in writing, you stop talking. I didn't reply. I took screenshots, the message, the caps, the CC list, the time. Then I leaned back and watched the office continue moving around me, unaware that a line had just been crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. Kevin thought he was firing an employee. That's the core misunderstanding that would end him. I wasn't an employee. I was a vendor, a business entity, bound by a service-level agreement written by a lawyer who treated executive overconfidence as a design flaw to be exploited. 30-day written notice, board consensus, documented cause, independent technical reviews. Miss any one of those, and the penalty wasn't discomfort. It was devastation. Here's the hidden truth. Corporations survive on people not reading contracts, on assumptions, on momentum, on the belief that power overrides paper. Kevin believed his title insulated him. He believed Hor's presence made it legitimate. He believed firing someone was as simple as pressing send. But legal reality doesn't care about belief. While he was congratulating himself for being decisive, the company had just exposed itself to damages that would make the CO's voice shake. Full contract value. Punitive penalties. Disclosures? And that was before we even talked about access. Because when you fire the man who understands where everything connects, you don't remove him. You freeze him. You legally bar him from intervening, from fixing, from stabilizing, from saving you from your own ignorance. That's the part executives never consider. By trying to assert dominance, Kevin had just severed the last layer of protection between the company and the systems it didn't understand. Before we go further, pause here. If you understand what just happened, if you feel the weight of this moment, type this phrase in the comments. Not once. Twice. The Foundation remembers. The Foundation remembers. Do it. This isn't for the algorithm. It's a marker. A signal that you're not just watching, you're learning. Because from this point on, the story stops being about a firing. and becomes about consequence. And consequences are always patient. The most dangerous phase of revenge is the silence after the strike. That's when arrogant men assume victory, when they tell themselves the problem is gone because it's no longer visible. Kevin didn't escort me out, he didn't call security, he didn't even follow up. In his mind, the deed was done. One Slack message, one show of authority, and the system would obediently adjust. That's how executives think systems work. Reality is less forgiving. I packed nothing. I powered nothing down. I simply stopped. And when a man like me stops, the absence isn't dramatic, it's subtle. Like a missing heartbeat, you don't notice until the dizziness starts. At first, nothing happened. Of course it didn't. Systems don't fail immediately. They degrade, they drift, they expose cracks slowly, like stress fractures spreading through concrete. Automated jobs still ran, data still flowed, dashboards stayed green. Kevin mistook this for proof that I was, in fact, replaceable. That's the third secret. The value of expertise is invisible right up until the moment it's catastrophic to lose it. By day 3, tickets began stacking up. Minor discrepancies, sync delays, small reporting mismatches. The kind of issues junior engineers panic over but can't diagnose. Kevin waved them off. Growing pains, he said. Transformation is messy. On day 5, a regional warehouse flagged a manifest mismatch. On day 7, a backup restore took longer than expected. On day 9, a third-party API throttled unexpectedly, and no one could explain why. Each issue had a solution. Each solution required context, not documentation judgment, the kind you only develop after watching the same system survive floods, strikes, cyber attacks, and executives with big ideas. That judgment lived with me, and now, legally, it was unavailable. Scott called. Quietly, nervously. He didn't leave a voicemail. He just sent a single message. Are you seeing this? I didn't respond, not out of spite, out of necessity. Because once you've been terminated, any intervention can be framed as unauthorized access, and unauthorized access turns leverage into liability. Kevin had unknowingly locked the company into its own ignorance. The board started asking questions, the kind that don't show up on calendars. Why are reports late? Why are vendors complaining? Why are contingency plans suddenly unclear? Kevin blamed the team, then the tools, then the legacy architecture. He brought in consultants, expensive ones who spoke fluently and understood nothing. They drew diagrams, they held workshops, they nodded gravely at problems they couldn't reproduce. Every hour they billed deepened the hole. Here's the quiet brutality of corporate revenge. You don't need to break anything. You just need to stop holding it together. And the man who forced that separation is always the one who pays the highest price, because he's the one who has to explain to people far above him why certainty has turned into confusion. Kevin had wanted a quick win. What he was getting was a slow bleed, and the worst part for him, he still thought he was in control. By the second week, the silence wasn't quiet anymore, it was loud. Loud in the way unanswered emails pile up. Loud in the way executives start asking the same question 3 different ways, hoping one version gets them a different answer. This is where corporate reality splits in 2 timelines. In Kevin's timeline, he was still the hero, the disruptor, the man making tough calls. He spoke confidently in meetings, framed every failure as temporary turbulence, every delay as resistance from an outdated culture. He believed narrative could override physics. In the other timeline, the real one, the company was drifting without a compass. Systems began contradicting each other. Numbers didn't reconcile, forecasts wobbled, nothing was dramatically broken, which made it worse. Dramatic failures demand attention. Subtle inconsistencies breed mistrust, and mistrust spreads upward fast. The board didn't care about Slack messages or bruised egos. They cared about risk, about exposure, about the word that terrifies institutions more than loss, uncertainty. That's when legal got involved, not loudly, not officially. They don't storm rooms. They review, they cross-reference, they ask for contracts. And when they pulled mine, the tone of the building changed. Because contracts don't argue, they don't posture, they don't care who thinks they're important. They just sit there, immutable, waiting for someone arrogant enough to ignore them. Kevin had triggered multiple breach points in a single sentence. Unauthorized termination, demand for credentials, attempted seizure of assets, involving without legal review. Each one alone was survivable. Together, they painted a picture the board couldn't ignore. That's another hidden rule. Corporations will tolerate incompetence far longer than they will tolerate liability. The CFO started asking questions Kevin couldn't answer. Why wasn't I responding? Why couldn't anyone else step in seamlessly? Why were outside consultants billing double with half the results? Kevin blamed my lack of cooperation. That defense collapsed instantly. Because once you claim someone is terminated, you also admit they're no longer obligated to save you. That's not insubordination, that's compliance. The board requested a timeline, then documentation, then correspondence. Slack logs are very thorough. I watched all of this from a distance. No gloating, no satisfaction, just observation. Like watching gravity reassert itself after someone steps off a ledge expecting the air to hold them up. Here's what most men don't realize. Revenge doesn't feel like victory when it's done correctly. It feels like inevitability. Like watching a structure collapse exactly the way the engineers said it would, while the people inside argue about whose fault it is. Kevin had wanted to demonstrate power. What he actually demonstrated was why power without understanding is just acceleration toward impact. And the ground was getting very close. Kevin was gone before the quarter ended, not escorted, not humiliated publicly. That's not how corporations kill careers. They do it quietly, behind closed doors, with phrases like mutual separation and strategic realignment. His name disappeared from email threads. His meetings were reassigned. His authority evaporated without ceremony. That's how power really ends, not with noise, but with erasure. The company survived. Corporations almost always do. They absorb damage, rewrite narratives, and continue forward as if nothing happened. A settlement was reached. Lawyers spoke. Numbers moved. Silence returned to the building, and I returned on my terms. Not as an employee, not as a subordinate. As what I had always been, an external force they couldn't afford to misunderstand again. My rate went up, my boundaries hardened, my authority became explicit instead of assumed. No apology was ever offered, none was needed. In corporate life, it's about stepping aside and letting arrogance collide with systems it never bothered to learn. Men like Kevin will always exist. New titles, new companies, same blindness. They confuse position with power, speed with intelligence, confidence with competence. And they always pick the wrong enemy because they don't know how to identify one. If you take anything from this, let it be this. Never advertise your leverage. Never threaten. Never rush. Build foundations so deep that when someone tries to remove you casually, the entire structure notices. And when they cross the line, when they put their ignorance in writing, do nothing. Let the system respond on your behalf. That's not weakness. You'll hear the hum beneath the noise. You'll recognize who actually holds things together. And you'll understand why the quiet men are always the most dangerous ones in the room. The foundation remembers. And now, so do you.